Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses, as we begin with Part 1, Preface and Introductory from The Philosophy of Fire by R. Swinburne Clymer. The Philosophy of Fire. The philosophy of fire underlies all true initiation as well as the secret doctrine and the ancient mysteries. It is likewise the foundation upon which are built all mystic and occult fraternities, the ideal republic and the Brotherhood of Man. By R. Swinburne Clymer, author of The Rosicrucians, Their Teachings, Alchemists, Divine Alchemy, etc., etc. To all seekers. This third edition of the Philosophy of Fire is issued as a landmark of the 72nd convocation of the Rose Cross Order in America. The Triple Order was founded by Paschal Beverly Randolph, M.D., and his co-workers after his return from the Orient. The Rose Cross Order acknowledges allegiance to the Grand Council of the Supreme Grand Temple of the Rosy Cross in America as the sovereign source of Rosicrucian art and the sovereign body of the Rosicrucian Brotherhood. The House of SS is at present situated in the city of Salem, Massachusetts. Preface to third edition. The first edition of the Philosophy of Fire was issued in 1905 and sold within a few months of its publication. The second edition, rewritten and very much enlarged, appeared in 1907, was well received and highly endorsed by students of the mysteries and the higher occult. Since the issue of this last edition, times have greatly changed. Opinions have undergone a mental revolution, and problems and subjects formerly tabooed and shunned by the educated classes are now being freely discussed. All this we had in mind while rewriting the Philosophy of Fire for its third edition, permitting us to give a clearer exposition of the fire philosophy underlying all religions, and likewise to extensively hint at the material basis underlying the teaching and training in the secret schools of the ancients. Many well-informed readers have labored under the impression that these schools had in mind merely the greater physical and higher mental development of its neophytes, forgetting for the moment, if they actually ever knew, that in ancient times, when the greater initiates ruled and ruled wisely, even those royally born could not become kings unless they had been fully trained and thoroughly educated in these schools. These rulers were termed the initiate kings. And while in power the people prospered and were protected in their liberties, it was only after the greater church became degraded and other than initiate kings ruled that the masses were exploited by the classes. Nevertheless, throughout the ages intervening between the glorious Egypt of 5,000 years ago and the present, many of the world's greatest leaders, generals, statesmen, and even kings and presidents have been taught statesmanship in these schools, which have continued a silent and secret existence up to the present moment. Having made this claim without any reservation whatever, we propose to give a short outline of the advantages spiritual instructions and training has for the true seeker, and to follow this with a statement expressing the opinions of the schools on the ideal republic and how it may be established. There are two methods of gaining knowledge. The one is that of the material school, the method and study of the experiences of others, and memorizing both the method and the conclusions reached. This is superficial to a degree because it depends entirely upon memory and belief, which can be turned into actual knowledge through experience, but the majority do not go that far, being willing to take for granted as truth that which others have concluded to be truth. The other method is that of developing the inner or spiritual faculties, thereby awakening the intuitive powers, through which both the means and the conclusions may be reached, often instantaneously, either through feeling or sensing, or by actual visualization and living for the moment the thing which is to be known. Through this process, at first difficult and painful, with possible after-effects, one may place oneself in the position of another undergoing certain trials and suffer all the tortures such are enduring. An easily comprehensible example is that of watching one with physical pain with such intensity as to forget the self, and during such time the watcher experiences all the pain and reflects on his own features the agony depicted on the face of the actual sufferer. The adherent of the material school relies entirely on the physical senses and on mental retention of the thing heard, while the spiritualist, word used in its real sense, retires to the source of all things and there obtains the information desired through what might be termed absorption, or the coming into communion with all that is. By this last statement, we do not wish to indicate the student in the secret school should not take up the studies as outlined by the material schools of the day. On the contrary, we emphatically state that for the welfare of humanity in general, the youth should acquire a thorough education by attending public school, college, and university. But with this regular or routine education, he should not forget that other side, the real side of his being, nor neglect its development. In other words, to be able, while following a systematic course of education, to follow a system of spiritual training and development, thus rounding out his foursquare being. Heretofore, it has been the belief of all but a few, possibly due to the impression left on the readers of the books dealing with the subject, that the secret schools taught man to find his own soul, to purify the heart, so as to throb with love for all humanity, and through the awakening of intuition to hold the keys to nature's laws, thereby enabling him to accomplish his desires. All this is true, insofar as the spiritual nature of man is concerned, but the secret schools have also always had in mind the betterment of physical humanity, and have been the relentless foes of autocrats, oligarchies, potentates, and of oppression in every form, teaching an ideal code of ethics for the establishment of an ideal democracy, not through revolution but by evolution, and that the true lasting republic be the outgrowth of granting equal rights to all men, special privileges to none. As previously stated, we believe the time is propitious for the secret schools to give a clear outline of what they have taught and still teach on the rights of man. All men are born free, but not equal. It would be both foolish and illogical to claim all men are equal when born. This inequality is both physical and mental. The child born of healthy parents, who themselves are obedient to the rules of hygiene and physical development, who live in harmony with creative laws, is certainly blessed with a more perfect and stronger physique than the child born to parents in the slums, who know nothing whatever of hygiene, physical development, or creative laws. It must and is freely admitted there are exceptions to this rule, but we state the general law. Likewise, the child born to parents who are mentally developed, of sound education, and of moderately brilliant attainment is in most cases better equipped mentally and certainly with greater incentive to become than the child of parents who are ignorant and of low mental development. However, though men are not born equal, all men should have equal opportunity in all respects. That this may become a possibility, the secret schools believe in the establishment of schools of education, which will permit every young man and woman, no matter how poor materially, the same opportunity for education and professional or scientific training as the children of the rich. Such institutions would undoubtedly require the aid of the state, but as it is a notoriously well-known fact that the sons and daughters of the middle class are better equipped both mentally and physically to become successes in life if given a fair chance than many of the sons and daughters of the ultra-rich, it behooves the state to quickly arrange for such educational institutions. All men, whether great or small, rich or poor, should be granted equal right for the protection of the person, with non-interference one with the other, unless one become a menace to the other. All men, whether rich or poor, weak or strong, the right of fair trial and be guaranteed justice. The poor man to be protected by the state of which he is a citizen and not left to the mercy of those rich in worldly goods. All men should be guaranteed equal rights of development, advancement, and religious freedom, a toleration of his beliefs, no matter what they may be, so long as he does not interfere with the beliefs or non-beliefs of his fellow man. An ideal state cannot exist if there is one law for the rich, another for the poor, one for the strong and another for the weak. The weak must be protected by the state until they gain strength, while the strong and the rich shall not be considered guilty merely because of their strength or their possessions. The ideal state can only exist when the honest possessions of the wealthy are protected against aggression, and on the contrary, the rights of the worker protected by just laws against exploitation by the strong or wealthy. Unquestionably, in the past, there were numberless kings, emperors, potentates, presidents, and employers of the laboring classes who were tyrannical, taking every advantage of the masses, giving them no more in return than absolutely necessary. This is true today, although in a lesser degree. It is equally true that throughout the ages there were many kings, emperors, potentates, presidents, kings of finances, and employers of labor who were just in every respect, who had the welfare of the people at heart. More such men exist today than ever before. All fair-minded men admit that the majority of men in the past, who possessed wealth or ruling power, were in a degree tyrannical, using such wealth or authority to either exact heavy toll from those less fortunate, or to demand obedience to established, though often unrighteous and unjust, laws. This is equally true today because many men vested with a little brief authority dearly love to display it and do not have the strength of character to be just and impartial to rich and poor, honored and disgraced alike. However, the honored, the strong and the wealthy have not been the only ones to show gross injustice to their fellow men. The poor, the workers, the masses have been equally guilty, nay, doubly unjust toward the rich and the strong and to their companions in misery and servitude. This is actually truer today than ever before in the history of the world. An assertion of this nature should not be voiced unless there is ample proof for it. Moreover, proof should be furnished with the statement. Let us consider the laborers, the class belonging to unions in their relation one to the other. As an example, we select the contracting carpenter who has in his employ 25 men. At best, not more than 5 of these are master joiners. There is a call for 5 men to do some building. The contractor selects and grades them so that not more than one of the 5 is a master mechanic. The one requiring the services of these carpenters must accept the men selected, except in rare cases. He must pay the same rate for the services of the unskilled he pays for that of the expert. And the man who does less than half as much, and there are always such in every company, work as the expert and unable to do perfect work, receives the same wages as the expert. If the laborer cannot be just to his fellow worker and is likewise unjust to the employer, forcing him to pay the same wages for unskilled services he pays for master workmanship, how can he expect justice from the ruling class, the strong, the wealthy? The plea may reasonably be advanced that the workers were compelled to form unions for their self-protection and against exploitation by the classes. Even if we were perfectly willing to admit this, it does not excuse the destructive practice of the wage scale which allows the expert, a member of a union, no more than the novice and slacker, many workers are such even after many years of experience, because the latter also belongs to the union. There is great injustice practiced by those in authority, those who are strong and wealthy, but they are in the minority. There is infinite greater wrong done by the masses, the workers, against the classes, and especially against each other because they are in the majority. The secret schools believe in absolute justice and cannot recognize an injustice just merely because it is committed by one in power or by those possessing power or wealth, nor on the excuse the deed is done by one of the masses, or by one seeking freedom from unfair conditions. Justice recognizes neither person or condition. She stands squarely for the right. The ideal state will jealously guard the rights and the welfare of the unborn. No state can long exist and look with favor on the illegitimately born, but the state can establish just laws preventing the birth of such, by recognizing the child born out of wedlock as possessing both father and mother, and by visiting severe punishment upon the father in the form of legally recognizing him as the father and forcing him to perform all the duties a natural, loving father would perform. Countless millions of children were born before a marriage ceremony existed. Can we believe all such were damned by God, whom we believe to be a loving Father? If they were not damned, then certainly He does not visit punishment upon the child born out of wedlock today, for it was not in position to prevent the wrong. For this reason it behooves the state to be just and protect it against the wrong of its inhuman creator and grant the equal rights our free constitution provides to all men, and which an ideal state must grant or fall to its doom. We do not bespeak free love in any sense of that word. On the contrary, we ask for the most rigorous laws to protect the sacredness of marriage and the home. The secret schools believe in the fourfold development of man, the refinement and awakening to consciousness of body, mind, spirit, and soul. They believe in and teach the bringing into consciousness of the God spark. Ye are the temples of the living God in man, that he may thereby recognize his divine birthright, the higher development of both his body and intellect, and finally in the equal rights of all men born of woman and the ideal state. Fraternally and Justice, R. Swinburne Clymer, Beverly Hall, Pennsylvania, January 1st, 1920. Introductory, first edition. There is nothing new under the sun. We believe it was Qoheleth, one of the greatest teachers of the ancient mysteries, who is given credit for first making this remark, though it is possible even he had quoted from some other master of the ancient school. Marie Corelli, the most justly famous author of the present day, in her book, A Romance of Two Worlds, says, "Yours? Why, what can you call your own? Every talent you have, every breath you draw, every drop of blood flowing in your veins is lent to you only. You must pay it all back. And as far as the arts go, it is a bad sign of poet, painter, or musician who is arrogant enough to call his work his own. It never was his and never will be. It is planned by a higher intelligence than his, only he happens to be the hired laborer chosen to carry out the conception. A sort of mechanic in whom boastfulness looks absurd as if one of the stonemasons working at the cornice of a cathedral were to vaunt himself as the designer of the whole edifice. And when a work, any work, is completed, it passes out of the laborer's hands. It belongs to the age and the people for whom it was accomplished, and, if deserving, goes on belonging to the future ages and future peoples. Thus, with the book now placed before the reader, I wish him to remember I do not call it mine. I have merely taken the works of many of those who have labored in this special field before me, have endeavored to choose such material and arranged it in such form as to create a harmonious whole. Even this material of which I have made use was seldom original with the author from whom I quote. For instance, the Secret Doctrine has come down the ages to us, no one being able to give us even an idea as to the time when the mysteries were first taught to mankind. These mysteries were handed down by initiate to initiate, sometimes taught in schools established for that purpose, at other times and more often taught secretly and in places little suspected as being the seats of learning or the caves of initiation. The question may logically be asked by the reader, why is it necessary to repeat the things which have already been written? It is a reasonable question and requires a frank answer. It is for the reason that many of those who gave their attention to these doctrines and in their writings quoted from them did so in a negative form. It is our desire to treat these subjects in a most positive manner, dealing only with facts as we know them, truths that can be verified by him who truly seeks to know. In numerous instances, the authors from whom quoted state the things which they had either heard or read, not belonging to and of the fraternities or secret schools in which the doctrines or philosophies are taught. Having no access to the secret records, they have been unable to vouch for the truth or the falsity of the claims made. Fully aware of the keen interest now taken by countless numbers in the secret science, higher occultism, mysticism, and higher development, known as initiation, having the records at my command which prove the things herein written to be true and beyond contradiction, I have ample reason and offer no excuse for the compilation of the present work. I do not wish to be accused of plagiarism, therefore I make these statements. I do not claim that a single line in the book is my own, though in many instances the interpretation given must be placed wholly to my personal responsibility. If the reader does find anything original or of value, let him give credit to those who I honor as my instructors. By doing so, you will give honor to whom it is due. I do ask the reader to remember this. Whatever is herein written is absolutely true, and if you are willing so to change your life and to become worthy, you will be able to find those who are able and ready to teach you, to indicate the path, leading to initiation, the finding of the soul, the Christ in you. History informs us thus, as soon as mankind recognized the relation existing between themselves and a creator and acknowledged moral responsibility for their acts to a supreme moral government, then religion became a pertinent fact, and systems of religious practices were introduced, whereby in an objective form their subjectivity could be outwardly made manifest. These systems are divided into monotheism and polytheism. The latter includes dualism and tritheism. The lowest grade of polytheism is fetichism or idolatry, which teaches the worship of inanimate objects, sticks and stones, and the work of the hands of men. Next is pyrolatry or worship of fire, and Sabaeism, worship of the sun. The first step of past masters or reformers was to receive a mission and revelation from some god. Thus, Amasis and Manives, lawgivers of the Egyptians, received their laws from Mercury, Thoth, Zoroaster of the Bactrians, and Zamolxis, lawgiver of the Gators, from Vesta, Zathrastes of the Armaspi, from a good spirit or genius, and all taught the doctrine of the law of karma as the only just and equable to all men. There is no doubt that all of them were initiates of the secret schools then existing, wherein were taught the secret doctrine and ancient mysteries, the right of every man to opportunity and justice, and the mystery of the philosophy of fire. Rhadamanthus and Minos, lawgivers of Crete, and Lycaon of Arcadia, had intercourse with Jupiter. Triptolemus of Athens was inspired by Ceres, Pythagoras, and Zaleucus. For the Crotonians and Locrians ascribed their institution to Minerva. Lycurgus of Sparta acted by direction of Apollo, and Romulus and Numa of Rome put themselves under the guidance of Consus and the goddess Egeria. The first Chinese monarch was called Fag 4, the son of heaven. Tuesco, the founder of the German nations, was sent to reduce mankind from their savage and bestial life to one of order and society, as signified by his name, which interpreted means interpreter of the gods. Thor and Odin, the lawgivers of the Western Goths, laid claim to inspiration and to divinity, and they have given the names to 2 days of the week. The constant epithets to kings in Homer are Diogenesis, horn of the gods, and Diotrephes, bred or tutored by the gods. When true initiation is once more understood by scholars, they will no longer deny that man can actually be taught by God or the supreme intelligence. Such is possible. Divine revelation to man, or to the mind and the soul of man, is not so difficult as one might imagine. Therefore, it cannot be questioned whether these masters and reformers received their instructions direct from God through development and initiation, because man can come into direct communication with his God if he is willing to live the life making such communion and instruction possible. Plutarch in Isis and Osiris say, "It was a most ancient opinion, derived as well by lawgivers as by divines, that the world was not made by chance, neither did one cause govern all things without opposition." This is likewise the doctrine of Zoroaster, in which were taught two opposite principles whereby the world was governed. The first religion or initial mysteries were those of Atlantis, known as the Hermetic philosophy. Later we find the Oriental mysteries of Isis and Osiris in Egypt. These were the same mysteries as the Hermetic philosophy of Atlantis, merely under a different name. The study of the mysteries of Isis and Osiris will quickly prove to the student that this was the pure fire philosophy. Zoroaster brought these mysteries into Persia, Cadmus and Inachus into Greece at large, Orpheus into Thrace, Melampsus into Athens. As these ancient mysteries were to Isis and Osiris in Egypt, so they were to Mithras in Asia. In Samothrace to the mother of the gods, in Boeotia to Bacchus, in Cyprus to Venus, in Crete to Jupiter, in Athens to Ceres and Proserpine, in Amphura to Castor and Pollux, in Lemnos to Vulcan. The most noted of these were the Orphic, Bacchic, Eleusinian, Samothracian, Kabiric, and Mithriac. It was agreed by Origen and Celsus that the mysteries taught the immortality of the soul, the law of karma, and also the law of reincarnation. It was taught in them that that initiate would be happier than other mortals because he had so lived in this world as to learn in the present incarnation what it would necessitate the profane many incarnations to comprehend. The mysteries taught it was the design of initiation to restore the soul to that state whence it fell, as from its native seat of perfection. Epictetus taught as follows, "Thus the mysteries become useful, thus we seize the true spirit of them, when we begin to apprehend that everything therein was instituted by the ancients for instruction and amendment of life." All who desired to become candidates for initiation into any of these mysteries were required to produce evidence of their fitness by due inquiry into their previous life and character. The Eleusinians stood open to none who did not approach the gods with a pure and holy worship, which was originally an indispensable condition observed in common in all the mysteries, and instituted by Bacchus or Osiris himself, who would initiate none but virtuous and pious men, and it was required to have a prepared purity of mind and disposition, as previously ordered in the sacrifices or in prayers, in approaching the mysteries. Max Müller wrote thus, In the language of mankind, in which everything new is old and everything old is new, an inexhaustible mine has been discovered for researches of this kind. Language still bears the impress of the earliest thoughts of man, obliterated, it may be, buried under new thoughts, yet here and there still recoverable in their sharp original outline. The growth of language is continuous, and by continuing our researches backward from the most modern to the most ancient strata, the every elements and roots of human speech have been reached, and with them the elements and roots of human thought. What lies beyond the beginnings of language, however interesting it may be to the philologist, does not yet belong to the history of man in the true and original sense of that word. Man means the thinker, and the first manifestation of thought is speech. But more surprising than the continuity of the growth of language is the continuity in the growth of religion. Of religion, as of language, it may be said that in it everything new is old and everything old is new, and that there has been no entirely new religion since the beginning of the world. The elements and roots of religion were there as far back as we can trace the history of man, and the history of religion, like the history of language, shows us throughout a succession of new combinations of the same radical elements. An intuition of God, a sense of human weakness and dependence, a belief in the divine government of the world, a distinction between good and evil, and a hope for a better life. These are some of the radical elements of all religions. Though sometimes hidden, they rise again and again to the surface. Though frequently distorted, they tend again and again to their perfect form, though always under another name. St. Augustine himself, in accordance with this idea, said, "What is now called the Christian religion has existed among the ancients and was not absent from the beginning of the human race until Jesus came in the flesh, from which time the religion which existed already began to be called Christian." The underlying principles in all true religions is the philosophy of fire. The very foundation of the secret doctrine and the ancient mysteries is this same philosophy of fire, symbol of God, life of love. In the work before the reader, quotations have been made from the secret science of the greater fraternities which were instrumental in shaping the religious beliefs of the people. The only one not thus considered is Zoroaster and his doctrine. Before the time of Zoroaster, the Persians, like the early Egyptians, worshipped in the open air long after other nations had constructed temples, as they considered the broad expanse of the heavens as a sublime covering for their devotion of the deity. Their places of sacrifice were much like those of the northern nations of Europe, composed of circles of upright stones, rough and unhewn. They abominated images and worshipped the sun and fire as representative of the omnipresent deity. The Jews, even though they did not belong to the inner circle of any priesthood and therefore merely followed the exoteric religious ceremonies, were not exempt from the worship of fire. God appeared in the cherubim over the gate of Eden as a flaming sword, and to Abraham as flame of fire, to Moses as a fire in the bush at Horeb, and to the whole assembly of the people at Sinai when he descended upon the mountain in fire. Moses himself told them that their God was a consuming fire, which was re-echoed more than once, and later the Jews were weak enough to worship the material fire in lieu of the invisible and eternal God. Zoroaster succeeded in persuading them to enclose their sacred fire altars in covered towers, because being on elevated and exposed hills, the fire was liable to be extinguished by storms. These were circular buildings covered with domes, having small openings at the top allowing the smoke to escape. Undoubtedly, a difference of opinion existed between the various sects, as is illustrated by the following story. A Jew entered a Parsi temple and beheld the sacred fire. "What?" said he to the priest. "Do you worship the fire?" "Not the fire," answered the priest. "It is to us the emblem of the sun and of his genial heat." "Do you then worship the sun as your God?" questioned the Jew. "Know ye not that this luminary also is but a work of the Almighty Creator?" "We know it," replied the priest, "but the uncultivated man requires a sensible sign in order to form a conception of the Most High, and is not the sun the incomprehensible source of light, an image of the invisible being who blesses and preserves all things?" "Do you people then," rejoined the Israelite, "distinguish the type from the original? They call the sun their God, and descending even from this to a baser object, they kneel before an earthly flame. Ye amuse the outward, but blind the inward eye, and while ye hold to them the earthly, ye draw from them the heavenly light. Thou shalt not make unto thyself any image or likeness. How do you designate the Supreme Being? Asked the Parsi. We call him Jehovah Adonai, that is Lord who is, who was, and who will be, answered the Jew. Your appellation is grand and sublime, said the Parsi, but it is awful too. A Christian then drew nigh and said, We call him Father. The pagan and the Jew looked at each other and said, Here is at once an image and a reality. It is a word of the heart. Therefore they all raised their eyes to heaven and said with reverence and love, Our Father. And they took each other by the hand, and all three called one another brother. The names of the various religious systems may be different, but the underlying principle, when actually understood, is ever the same. It is immaterial what exoteric system of religion may be studied. It will always be found that God is a consuming fire. In the ancient mysteries, this is even more a fact, because therein we are taught what this living fire actually is, where it is, and how and whence man received it. Ever since the most ancient times, divine wisdom has taught the same doctrine through the lips of the wise. Hermes Trismegistus, Confucius and Zoroaster, Buddha and Jesus who became the Christ, Socrates, St. Martin and Jacob Behmen, Theophrastus Paracelsus, Cornelius Agrippa, Shakespeare and Schopenhauer, P.B. Randolph, M.D., James R. Phelps, M.D., Freeman B. Dowd, Dr. Edward H. Brown, and others. They have all taught the same truths, more or less complete, because they were all from the same school of philosophy, and each one of these teachers clothed the truths they had in a form best suiting his own understanding and best adapted to the comprehension of his disciples and the times in which they lived. None may claim these doctrines as strictly their own. Even Jesus said, The doctrines which I teach are not my own, but it is the truth which teaches them through me. He that teaches his own doctrines and theories speaketh of himself. He is acting under the impulse of earthly ambition, and seeketh his own glory and not the glory of God. But he that seeks to glorify not himself but God, by giving expression to the truth of which he is conscious, is true, and no evil can be in him. Live so that you may know the truth, not by external appearances and argumentation, but by its own inherent power. Be true, and you will know the truth. The organism of man, he said, resembles a kingdom. Its capital is the mind, and its temple, the soul. In that capital and temple there are many false prophets, as there are in Jerusalem. There are the Pharisees of sophistry and false logic, credulity and skepticism. And the scribes are the prejudices and erroneous opinions engrafted upon the memory. Do not listen to what these false prophets say, but listen to the voice of wisdom that speaks in your heart. For verily I say unto you, the temple, built of speculations which the scribes have erected, will be destroyed, and not one of the dogmas and theories of which it has been constructed will remain when the day of judgment appears. See, the truth enters your heart, bearing the palm leaf, the symbol of peace. Even Jesus made use of symbolism. Let it abide in you, and abide yourself in the truth. There is no other worship acceptable to the universal God, but to keep his commandments, which he reveals to you through the power of divine wisdom, whose voice speaks in your higher consciousness. Love one another, and as you grow in unselfish love, so will you grow in wisdom. Open your hearts and see the image of the true God within them. He is not to be found in man-made churches, and if anyone tells you Christ is in this church, or he is in that one, do not believe it, but seek for God within your own heart. Let not the Pharisees and the scribes and the intellectual powers of your own mind mislead you, but listen to the divine voice of intuition which speaks at the center of your soul. This is the basic fundamental doctrine of the Rose Cross. Ye are the temples of the living God. Consequently, man must build in and include within his being all things. The Rose Cross teaches intellectual attainments are desirable and to be encouraged, but intellectual brilliancy alone will not result in immortality. On the contrary, it may be the direct means of preventing its possessor from following the lowly path, which would lead to soul attainment, immortality. Thus, Jesus agrees with the fundamental doctrine of the secret school, and with the instructions given in the fraternity of the present day, namely that man is the product of his own thoughts. He is that which he creates in himself by the way he thinks and lives. For his external form is merely the outward symbol of his internal character, modified by the want of plasticity of the gross matter composing his body. For this may not be sufficiently plastic to change in form as rapidly as his thoughts. The matter composing the soul is creative. If our thoughts are continually low and vulgar, the soul will become correspondingly degraded. But if we are continually thinking of a high ideal, our ideal will take form within ourselves. If we are satisfied with a belief in a historical Jesus without seeking to bring to birth or to enable a Christ to grow within ourselves, such a belief will not merely be useless, but will even be an impediment in our way towards perfection. The object of the secret science, the ancient mysteries, the secret doctrine of initiation and of all living religions is one and the same thing. That is to ennoble mankind and to awaken in men a realization of the divinity of the soul within themselves. Religion in its theoretical aspect means a real knowledge of the relations which exist between man and the external source from which his soul emanated in the beginning. Religion in its practical aspect means the union of man with God, a union that cannot be effected through the external interference or permission of a clergyman, no matter how holy he may be, but must be effected by the power of the internal will and desire. There is no real knowledge to be attained by merely learning a theory. There is no real understanding unless the theory is confirmed by practice, in other words, by living the doctrine believed. Such knowledge is acquired neither by the study of theology and philosophy nor by moralizing. It does not depend on any theoretical information in regard to terrestrial or celestial things, nor can spiritual soul regeneration be attained by leading a virtuous life for fear of the consequences that are likely to follow if we indulge in evil thoughts and acts. It can be attained only by a realization of the truth within our own selves. There is nothing to prevent any man from arriving at such a comprehension except the lower tendencies of his mortal nature. The process of regeneration or initiation, therefore, involves a continual battle with the lower self and an unceasing fight between spiritual aspirations and earthly desires, in which the soul must gain the victory over matter or ultimately lose its identity as an individual being. All the boasted study of the science learned in schools contains but little real knowledge. In it is little of the absolute truth. It is merely relative knowledge and refers to the relations which external material objects bear to one another. And all this knowledge, however useful it may be, as long as we live in a world of sense, sensation and matter, will be utterly worthless to us when we enter that state of being wherein matter as such no longer has a part. The only true science which is really useful to us in time and eternity, in our present state not less than in the future, is the practical knowledge of the regeneration of man. The authors herein quoted from and to whom I desire to give full credit are Pascal Beverly Randolph, MD, Franz Hartmann, MD, J.D. Buck, MD, P.H. Phelon, MD, James R. Phelps, MD, Hargrave Jennings, and Edward Schur. Each one of these great teachers has been as important to the present work as the other, and equal credit is therefore due to all. In the body of the work, the text is not often interrupted by giving authors' names in immediate connection with quotations, it being the compiler's desire to give the teachings of masters with the least possible interruption of thought. If the work will be the means of opening the eyes of a few and will influence them to try to find their own soul, I will be well satisfied. R. Swinburne Clymer, Beverly Hall, Quakertown, Pennsylvania, December 27, 1919. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.